Diddy could walk free or face the biggest fall of his career. The courtroom is heating up, and the jury might deliver a verdict before fireworks light the sky on the 4th of July. Here's what you need to know before the gavel comes down. But here's the million-dollar question. How does any of that prove racketeering? Today was a turning point. In fact, it may have been a winning day for Diddy's defense team. What was expected to be a 2-week showcase of evidence may now wrap up in just a single day, 2 at most. The prosecution is set to close on Monday. By Tuesday, the defense gets its shot. Closing arguments might begin Wednesday, and by Friday, the jury could already be deep in deliberation. And here's where it gets interesting. The 4th of July holiday is just around the corner. Veteran court reporters know this. Juries hate working through holidays. They'll often push hard to wrap things up before a long weekend, and if they're close to reaching a decision, they might just force consensus faster than usual. I'm not saying we're getting a one-day verdict, but don't rule it out. Now, let's talk about the testimony from Brendan Paul, the man tabloids labeled Diddy's drug mule. Arrested the day authorities raided Diddy's homes, he admitted to arranging freak off rooms and buying drugs. But again, does that prove organized crime? Not really. Yes, buying drugs is illegal, but if that's enough for racketeering charges, then half of Los Angeles would be on trial. Racketeering typically involves a structured criminal enterprise using a legitimate business as a front. Diddy, he's chaotic, impulsive, hardly the mastermind of a criminal syndicate. Diddy may be guilty of many things, but racketeering in the traditional sense, that's a hard sell. To make matters worse for the prosecution, Brendan Paul didn't help their case much. When cross-examined by the defense about Jane, one of the women allegedly coerced, he flat out denied seeing any signs of force or manipulation. And remember, this was the prosecution's own witness, so why put him on the stand? Now, on the issue of consent, did Jane or Cassie ever agree to these acts freely? The strongest piece of evidence so far is Cassie's claim that Diddy showed her a freak-off video on a flight from France and threatened to release it unless she participated in another one in New York. That's textbook coercion, if the jury believes her, but that's the big if. Beyond that, there hasn't been overwhelming proof of coercion. So the prosecution's best chance for a conviction may rest not on racketeering or consent, but on something called the Mann Act. That's a federal law about transporting individuals across state lines for illegal sexual activity, and Diddy might be in serious trouble there. If the jury believes he flew someone in, paid them, and intended prostitution to happen, that's enough. And jurors who aren't fully convinced on the bigger charges might still be willing to convict on this one. It's like giving them an option to say, maybe not guilty of everything, but definitely guilty of something. Here's where jury psychology comes in. Sometimes they bargain. You don't believe racketeering, fine, but give us the Mann Act charge. This kind of horse trading happens in jury rooms more than people think. They want closure. They've given weeks of their lives to this trial. A mistrial or hung jury would feel like a waste, so they look for middle ground, and all of this sets up what might be a dramatic finish next week. Interestingly, the defense initially said they'd need 2 weeks to present their case. Now they're only taking 1 or 2 days. That signals something. Either they don't have strong witnesses, or they believe the prosecution hasn't proven enough to require a big rebuttal. Sometimes confidence is a tactic. By keeping it short, they might be saying, look, we don't need to do much because the case against us is already falling apart, and jurors notice that. It can create a subconscious impression that the defense has the upper hand. It's also a subtle thank you to the jury, saving them from 2 more weeks of testimony. That matters, especially when everyone wants to go home for the holidays, so brace yourself. Next week, the United States vs. Sean Diddy Combs could reach its climax. The verdict may be closer than anyone expected. The courtroom has gone quiet, but the tension outside is deafening. Journalists are lining the steps, social media is on fire, and fans, critics, and the industry itself are all holding their breath. What will the jury decide? This case isn't just about Sean Diddy Combs, it's about power, influence, and the hidden mechanics of celebrity culture. For decades, Diddy has sat at the top of the music industry, celebrated as a mogul, entrepreneur, and icon. But now, behind the polished image, we're being asked to examine the man behind the empire, and whether that empire was built in part on fear, manipulation, and coercion. And yet, the prosecution's case hasn't been as airtight as many expected. They came in with bombshell accusations, hoping to paint Diddy as a mastermind of organized depravity, but what the jury got instead was something far messier, fragments of behavior that felt more chaotic than calculated. The term racketeering evokes images of mafia boards, coded communications, and criminal enterprises with clear structures. What we've seen in this trial is something else entirely. Diddy, if guilty, isn't the godfather. He's the disorganized king of chaos, allegedly pulling strings in all directions, but without the systematic control you'd expect in a true racketeering case. And that may work in his favor, because remember, in criminal court, it's not about what you think happened. It's about what you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and doubt is exactly what the defense is banking on, because inside the jury room, it's not just the law at work, it's human nature. Personalities clash. Pressure builds, people want to go home, they make deals, trade opinions, and sometimes even swap guilt for silence. It's less about legal code, more about emotional equilibrium. They might say, let's acquit on racketeering, we're unsure. Let's drop coercion, it's complicated. But on the Mann Act, he's guilty, and that's enough. That's not how law school teaches it, but that's often how real life verdicts are made. So what happens next? If the jury comes back with a split decision, guilty on one count, not guilty on others, Diddy could still face serious consequences. A single federal conviction, especially under the Mann Act, carries real weight. If he's convicted, the fallout will be enormous. The entertainment world will scramble to distance itself. Brand deals will evaporate. Collaborations will be pulled. And legally, a conviction would open the door to civil suits, massive settlements, and possibly more investigations. But if he walks free, he won't walk clean, because even an acquittal doesn't erase what's been unearthed. Allegations, testimonies, stories of abuse, manipulation, control, the public image of Diddy, the polished business mogul, will never be the same again. In the court of public opinion, trials don't end with a verdict. They echo, they stain, and they linger. We may be just days away from the final verdict, but in truth, the real trial of fame, power, and accountability is just beginning. So keep watching, because no matter how this ends in the courtroom, the ripple effects have already begun, and they may shake the very foundation of the celebrity world as we know it.